Hi everyone and welcome to another Oracle Guidance. For today's reading I have taken a different approach where rather than to provide random channeled messages, I have asked the universe for general guidance. So in this spread, the first position represents the challenge, the second position represents the opportunity, the third position represents the resolution, and then we have an advice in the form of the cross down below. So this reading kind of reflects how all of us collectively are doing from a spiritual, psychological perspective, and the advice and the guidance should be taken as such, purely spiritual or psychological. Now, before I get into the reading, I would just like to mention that today's cards are not very positive, they are not very uplifting and hopeful, but this doesn't mean anything, for right now, even in this very present moment, Mars is conversing in tension with Pluto, so that is an extremely negative, tensionate, violent vibe, energy, for all of us. For Mars is the lower malefic, so especially now in shadow, and when it holds such a very tense conversation with Pluto, the god of the underworld, the planet of death, transformation, especially in the position of a part of the sky Capricorn, which is responsible for the structure basically of our material world. So Pluto's symbolism, retrograde even, in the sign of Capricorn, well, it cannot be a very positive, optimistic, uplifting energy, especially that its symbolism is greatly expanded by Jupiter, and then there is Saturn, the ruler of that sign. So it doesn't really matter what archetype we embody, who we truly are, our spirituality, our outlook on life. Well, this is a very strong pivotal moment when the karmic forces and everything are just reaching a breaking point, when basically the old order truly has to collapse. This is it. This is the beginning. This is where very strong and powerful changes are going to follow, and they're going to be really, really fast-paced. So it doesn't matter how we look at it. Even if our personal lives are totally okay, we're safe, we are aligned with our inner truth, we are doing everything that we want to do, still this is a collective energy and all of us are part of the human collective. So this has to be a low for all of us, so there is no way to escape the karmic message that is being delivered to us, which can have so very many different interpretations and ways of seeing it, yet still there is one nuance of it which is basically undeniable, and that is very, very straightforward. More specifically, well, we as a human collective, we as a species, in our rather recent past, for example the last hundreds of years, when we did possess a lot of knowledge, we evolved psychologically and through our studies, research, even spirituality and everything, we did evolve massively, yet despite of our evolution, despite, acquiring a lot of knowledge, well, we didn't invest that much in our collective psychological well-being. We didn't do very many things for our mental well-beings. Well, it's undeniable that there were movements and actions and, legislation and laws and reforms and all of that, but it was definitely not enough. It didn't really reflect our level of knowledge. So right now, when basically karma is collapsing down on us, we cannot really expect to be very happy, to be very positive, to be supported by other people, by the spirit, by anything, because simply as a species, we didn't invest as much as we should have in our psychological well-being, in the well-being of our minds, our souls. We rather chose to be selfish and, every man for himself, especially from a psychological perspective. So right now, it doesn't matter who we are, and it doesn't really matter what choices we made in life, because this is a very concentrated, singular karmic moment. For example, as in a comparison, when a star collapses on itself, as in the core of the star, well, it changes. The change and transformation is inevitable, and it is usually a cosmically violent process because there's a massive explosion. So just because, right now the overall energy is not that hopeful and optimistic, it doesn't really mean anything for the long-term future, because, this is what we have to harvest. And when we are being regarded as a collective, so, one single organism formed of many, many, many individuals, many unique, distinctive building parts, yet still, when such a very strong karmic moment approaches, the individual and what the individual represents doesn't matter as much, because, this is a collective harvest. So, like it or not, we have to take our share, regardless if we deserve it personally or not. This may seem as somewhat of an injustice, but it doesn't have to be, because, this is just the lesson. And when it's a collective lesson, well, then all of us, as I said earlier, regardless of our life choices, of our worldviews and principles, and what we have done in our lives, it doesn't matter that much. We still have to take in the lesson. We still have to approach whatever is being shown to us, standing from a place of an observer, and not as much, regarding our personal situation as if we deserve it personally or not really. Collectively, like it or not, this is it. We kind of deserve what we're having in this present moment, and there is no way to out-talk this, no way to out-philosophize this. This is what we have, this is what we have to work with. So in challenge position, we have the Chariot reversed, clarified by the High Priestess reversed. Now in challenge position, usually the shadow expression of the cards are emphasized on. So the Chariot reversed, well, that is pretty simple. All of us, one way or another, in at least one area of life, we are feeling stuck. Our progress is just a faint memory. Even our hopes of achieving some kind of momentum progress or maybe a quantum leap are actually put on hold. So basically, when we feel stuck, stagnant, without any possibility to move forward, materially, physically, in our, human lives, that is one thing. But when we even feel that way psychologically and spiritually, well, that is even worse. Because as the High Priestess shows us, many of us have this tendency to ask the Divine Mind, why me? What did I do wrong to deserve this? Why am I in the same boat with everyone else when I made different choices? I lived my life in a totally different manner, so I shouldn't be here right now. What is the wisdom? What is the message? What is the greater truth in all of this? Many of us might be asking ourselves, or the universe, the Divine Mind, or maybe other readers, this exact question. And the High Priestess reversed is telling us, well, there doesn't really have to be any greater wisdom in this. Astrologically speaking, Saturn in the sign of Capricorn retrograde, in the third decan, a karmic decan, where its shadow expression is greatly emphasized. Well, It is what it is. There doesn't have to be any greater logic to it. This is the energy of standstill. This is the energy of sacrifice, of hardship. And like it or not, all of us are recipients of this energy because, Capricorn is, as I said, a part of the sky, and it's all of our sky. The sky doesn't belong to a specific person or individual. When we look at the sky, it is humanity's sky. It is basically the reflection of how humanity, the human collective, is doing. And when we have Saturn in that position, and also Mars is starting to square Saturn as well, it just is what it is. We have to accept that right now these are the times that we are living, and we simply don't have to split the hair in four, neither logically, rationally, neither spiritually, neither karmically, because simply put, one way or another, all of our ancestors, those individuals whose genes we do carry inside of us, are responsible for the way the world is in the present moment. If that their actions were something specific, as in crimes, violence, joining a not so favorable cause, or maybe their actions might have been sheer ignorance, passivity, etc. It doesn't really matter to the universe when we are being regarded as a collective. It is what it is. This is what we deserve. So actually sometimes, the Chariot reversed and the High Priestess reversed in challenge position, we shouldn't seek greater wisdom, greater enlightenment when there isn't none. If we create reality through our psyches, through our beliefs, through our perceptions, well, as a collective, basically this is what we have created. We can blame it on so very many different things, yet still at the end of the day, it is still us who is the recipient of this energy. So if we do not own it, if we do not stare it in the face, if we do not draw our own personal conclusions, not as much, about our own lives, our own destinies, why us, but about, basically the collective that we are being part of, then this energy will just confuse us and keep us stuck psychologically and spiritually until all of this big global turmoil and pivotal moment is over and done with. And if we do want to look at the big picture, well then what we truly have to see here is that after, the fall, after the deconstruction, the destruction of the old order is complete, well then all of us will be invited to reconstruct, to set new foundations, to raise up new pillars, to support our new paradigm, our new reality, so to speak. And those pillars, first of all, are principles, ideologies, values. So these are what have to crystallize inside of us so that we can start building anew when the moment comes. And that moment is not far away whatsoever. From an astrological perspective, well, it's without a shadow of doubt that it begins on the 21st of January 2020, coinciding with the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in 0 degrees of Aquarius, the very first, sign that the age of Aquarius is installing itself over time. But in order for us to start reconstructing, and in order for us to align ourselves with the greater and highest expression of Aquarius, which is humanitarianism, equality, we can all function as one without the problems, the differences and uniqueness, the distinctiveness of the individual don't really have to pose a threat or represent any problem or obstacle. We can work very well with each other, because individuality and uniqueness is just a great addition to any kind of synergy. And at the same time, Aquarius technology, internet, the flow of information can work in our greatest good and our advantage if we know how to use it in a very moral and ethical and constructive way. But in order for all of us, to understand the necessity, the sanctity, the utility of these principles, and in order for us to believe in them, to embody them, to turn it into a great motivational force, which is definitely going to guide the reconstruction process, well, this harsh lesson that we see in the present moment, it has to sink in very, very deeply into all of us. So that is why this might be the answer to the question, why me? Why am I in this situation? This is why, because, we have to learn the lesson one way or another. There is no escape without truly comprehending what we did wrong in the past, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, from every single perspective. This lesson has to be crystal clear in our minds, and not just in our own minds, but the future generation as well. So our children and grandchildren. So that's why we are living this so very intensely, so that even after the times change, we remember these lessons and we pass them down in a very truthful and authentic manner to the future generations, who will definitely make sure never to repeat the same mistakes again. And we can trust the future generations, because from an astrological perspective, that is exactly, the North Node is in Gemini right now at this very important pivotal moment, so that the education system, how we train our children from a spiritual and psychological perspective, can truly serve them for the rest of their lives. Because without a shadow of a doubt, our current education systems do give them a lot of info, knowledge, everything that they could possibly require, except true wisdom. The true, collection of wisdom that our species has accumulated, fought for, and sacrificed for over so many millennia. So, one of the big and major lessons of this Lion Gate energy was actually about the children and about the future generation. Yes, on one hand, we have to save them from physical dangers, for example, pedophiles and all of that. But on the other hand, we must also make sure to pass down to them very healthy knowledge, information, life skills, and our wisdom, the true, authentic wisdom that our species have sacrificed for, died for, over so very many millennia. And that wisdom doesn't even have to, be dressed in spiritual, religious, etc. robes, because, the conclusion of every kind of religion and spirituality is so very, very simple. Respect life, respect every sentient living being, and the list can continue. These are lessons full of wisdom, and it doesn't need any religion, any, this information doesn't need to be dressed up in any way. It is perfectly valid, and it gets the message through without any alteration, any sugarcoating, or any manipulation woven into this. For the opportunity position, we have the 4 of coins reversed and clarified by the 3 of swords. Now this energy represents a rather harsh reality check and wake-up call that there is a big lesson which was deeply programmed into our psyches, which is basically being deconstructed by the highest forces. And even though this moment is very unpleasant, extremely painful for some people, it is still a massive divine blessing, because this is something the universe is doing for us in our place, because it cannot expect us to do this alone, for the simple reason that things got out of hand so much that no matter who we are, no matter how enlightened we are, this is something the universe simply has to rip out from the deepest cores of our minds, which we simply cannot accomplish alone. Perhaps there are some individuals out there with great psychological power who could accomplish this, but the vast majority of us simply don't have that condition in our lives to do it. And we're talking about, the Four of Coins reversed. We were taught either directly or indirectly, either, personally by our parents or by society, by the job, career we took on ourselves. It doesn't matter how our lives played out. I think so many of us have this programming deeply inserted into the deep cores of our minds that self-worth is only valid and authentic if external reality reflects it. Also, that true human level happiness is greatly conditioned by self-worth. So if we put two and two together, we can see that we were basically programmed that if we're not very well financially, materially, if we are not a VIP or a very relevant person in society, in community, in our group, well then we are basically invisible, and this can distort our true sense of self-worth, and basically it strips us not just from our divinity, but also it kills the inner child, and it just turns us into a flesh and blood artificial form of existence. So basically this is kind of evoking a strong, deeply rooted trauma which many spiritualists carry inside of them, and not everyone is totally aware of this. For example, if their magic, their principles, the forces that they work with don't manifest one way or another physically, well, that is a clear sign that they're amateurs, that they are not meant to do this, they're not meant to be immersed in this, and that is a very, very strong spiritual poison and blockage which can just devastate the lives of so many individuals. Or another example, if someone is very, very skilled, for example, let's say intuitive, and can do a lot of great things in the world with their gifts and their talents, yet their lives are not a dream, or maybe quite the contrary, their lives are a living nightmare because they're challenged from every single direction, and no one, not even the spiritual force that works through them, has their backs. Well then, how can those individuals feel? How can life and existence feel for them? Because they might think that they're actually living a lie, for if they are guided, if they are so supported by the Spirit, why isn't exactly their own lives a very positive and beautiful reflection of how the life of a spiritualist should be? And of course this is perfectly valid for, a simple religious person, because if they're truly devoted, if they're truly faithful, then why isn't the divine power helping them as much as it should? And many times it's quite the contrary, where the more faithful, devoted they are, their lives are that much full of challenges and obstacles. And anyway, it is exactly this programming, this very strong blockage, that the universe is actively almost directly removing one by one out of all of our minds, because this is one of the biggest things that has to change. Without this, there is no future. Because, your relationship with yourself, what you feel and think about yourself, should never ever ever depend on external reality. Basically, that is why you're a divine being. That is why your free will has, the most divine sovereignty attached to it. Because it doesn't matter who and how and what your life is in flesh. You're still allowed to feel and think what you want to feel and think. And no one and nothing can condition this. And of course, this is where the universe, the divine intelligence, can no longer heal us, heal the collective, remove this very, very toxic programming outside to rip it out of our mental spheres. It just can't act, it cannot manifest indirectly through someone or something or anything. So basically, it is infiltrating itself into the collective consciousness, and this is the first thing that it does. One way or another, each and every individual experience this their own unique way. May it be the dark night of the soul, may it be a heavy depression, may it be extreme anxiety, but this is what is happening. The universe is trying to combat that old, deeply rooted programming, which isn't as much our fault. We were simply born into that, and everything from the earliest moment of childhood simply showed us that that is the way. So that's why maybe right now we don't stand a chance against that program alone. So the universe is helping us, healing us, but that healing is rather painful because we have to be confronted as many times as we need to with our low self-worth. And whenever we embody that vibe of this low self-worth, where we think that we're not worthy, we think that we are just amateurs, that we don't deserve anything good in life because, we chose not to be as relevant materially as we should have been. So basically, this theme is returning into our awareness, to our consciousness, over and over and over again, until we somehow break under the pressure and just decide there and then that it's over. That our true self-worth can never ever ever depend on external reality. We know who we are, we know what we deserve just inside of us, and that is the way it should always be. And of course, when the vast majority of us do embody this principle, this great universal divine truth, that is when things are truly gonna change. And the big picture, what actually this will create in external reality, well, that is very straightforward. The term that they use to describe this just doesn't come into my mind right now, so I'm gonna describe it. That general income, where just being born as a human being gives you the right to have an income or some kind of resources without having to do anything specific as in work or start a career. That is basically the material expression of true liberty, when humankind supports its own just because they can, just because they find that this is the normal way to go about things. An individual's contribution to the human collective doesn't necessarily have to be like a specific work or whatever. Their sheer personalities, the spirit that they embody when they're born, that is more than enough. So, this is the big picture. This is where this series of dark nights of the souls and depressions, is all of this, is taking all of us. This is the future that is waiting for us. And the biggest miracle of it, when this comes into reality, because I don't think this is a question of if, this is definitely a question of when. Well, when this happens, when someone just makes the choice to be with themselves and spend as much time as they need to discover themselves, to figure out who they are and what they want to do in life, well, that will no longer mean a death sentence, because if the collective just supports them and their material well-being, their physical well-being is not put in danger, it won't have any negative consequences, then imagine how many people are going to choose to embody their passions regardless if they're the world's number one, the best of the best, or they're just, let's say, amateurs. Everyone can still be very happy with themselves. And for example, let's say whenever someone's passion dies out and they need to find a new one, jump to the next one, well, taking some time out is not going to be the end of the world. Neither is it going to put their lives into danger. So isn't that the future that all of us have to embrace? But this future can only exist if that very deeply rooted collective programming is just ripped out, both from our individual mental spheres and also out of collective consciousness. Because basically, if anything, that is the biggest lie, and that is the most devastating, enslaving, and shackling principle that simply is devastating us, and it's totally invisible to the vast majority of us, but that is why we're so very unhappy collectively. That is why even millionaires and, the most wealthiest people and successful in the world just, collapse under the inner pressure, because, the force which motivated them to get there wasn't as much passion as a lot of compromises and a lot of inner torture, when they just had to embody something they're truly not for the sake of success and to break through. And that, of course, at the end, when they achieve victory, it will feel so very bitter, and that trauma will be alive for as long as they live, or for as long as they have their careers. So if you're someone who is really, really having a hard time now, who is losing all self-esteem, all self-worth, who is really, really heartbroken by every single person in their lives, even by the divine, even by the universe, everything they believed in, well, don't really panic, don't worry, because this is actually healing you. This is confronting you. This is forcing you to finally make that decision that your true self-esteem and who you are and what you deserve doesn't depend neither on karma, neither on the past, neither on your material life, neither on your social life. It just depends on you and your soul and nothing else. The resolution, we have the Seven of Wands reversed and the Moon. This is a rather simple but very uplifting message. The Seven of Wands. Right now, all of us have to defend ourselves. All of us have to face challenges. May they come from the external reality, for example, all of the things that threaten our futures, our safety, or may it come from inside of us, our fears, our worries, our insecurities. We are still embodying that Seven of Wands, where we just have to defend ourselves, hold our positions, hold our grounds, not give up, not give in to pain, fear, whatever. But as soon as that ends, as soon as that Seven of Wands is going to reverse, as in where we put down the defenses, we put down our weapons, our survival instincts are no longer triggered, then we have the Moon, where our souls and the clean waters that are inside of us, the crystal clear waters, which just reflect the beauty, radiance, the brilliance of the Mother Moon, the Queen of the Soul, well, that is the state of being that awaits all of us. And from that position, where the waters inside of our souls are crystal clear, clean, unpolluted, untainted by anything, well, they will reflect back the brilliance, the love, the kindness, the good intent of the divine intelligence, and that the sheer psychological attitude when we stand from a position when we're just happy with ourselves, we're happy with who we are, we're happy with the role that we embody, and that role doesn't have to be, light and love. It can be anything that you truly authentically are. If you're happy with that, well, you're already exactly who you're supposed to be. So that is happiness. And when so very many individuals feed this energy of being happy with themselves into the collective reality, well, then naturally our world is going to reflect that. And finally, the conclusion, the star clarified by the Wheel of Fortune. This is a really positive message once again, because it tells us the star. The star is on one hand Aquarius, where exactly the Great Conjunction is going to take place on the 21st of December. So basically, the moment of salvation, the moment when we're actually stepping into the manifested new paradigm, will coincide with the Great Conjunction. That is when we can actually embody hope. That is when we can actually start rebuilding, and that is already a positive psychological state, because when we're rebuilding with hope, we're rebuilding with love, we're rebuilding with faith, and whatever challenges might be there then, they won't matter as much, because all of us are going to be that much more motivated to make it. And finally, the Wheel of Fortune, Jupiter is debilitated in the sign of Capricorn, so it's not as hopeful, optimistic, lucky, bestower of blessings as it can possibly be. But when it moves into Aquarius, its symbolism and its energy will take a totally different expression. And Saturn as well, because Saturn is really beneficial, really positive in its ancient ruling sign of Aquarius. The ancient and the works of the medieval alchemists reflected that Saturn is quite malevolent in its home of Capricorn. It can be like a ruthless judge, like a ruthless slave driver, but in the sign of Aquarius, that is when it promotes solidarity, equality, progress for the future, hopes and dreams coming into existence. So this is like a promise from the divine mind and the universe that things are truly and genuinely gonna get better as we start heading towards December this year. And then the next couple of years, 2021 and 2022, is gonna be like a massive reconstruction. Of course, there are going to be challenges and everything, but it is our attitudes and our psychological states that are going to be so very different. So the challenges and the obstacles won't really even matter there and then, because our inner power will be more than enough to handle everything. I really hope that this reading delivered at least a tiny little bit of spark of hope to you, regardless of how bad or dire or, depressive your situation is. Remember that there is truly a light at the end of the tunnel, which isn't that far away now. So if you held on until this moment, then you only have to hold on a couple of months more, and things are definitely gonna get better. If you would like a personal reading, or a spiritual guidance like this one, just log on to 1millionnights.com, where an advisor of your choosing is gonna be more than happy to share their gifts and their spiritual insight with you. Thank you again for listening. Until next time, bye for now.